Kassie, we can see you.
Bye. Kia ora to the Finance and Expenditure Select Committee, and thank you for your time. He uri tēnei no Ngāti Raukawa ko Ngāti Tūwhare tō Hoki, ko Kassie Hartendorf tōku ingoa. And today I'm representing Action Station in Hoki, ko Kassie Hartendorf tōku ingoa. And today I'm representing Action Station, an independent, progressive, people-powered organisation made up of nearly 600,000 people. Together we care about a fair and flourishing Aotearoa with care, creativity, courage and compassion at its core. We've been working on kaupapa such as strengthening democracy, economic fairness, te tiriti o Waitangi and more since 2014. We encourage and equip people to have a say in the political decisions that get made about their lives, which has resulted in us deeply observing and participating in parliamentary processes over the past 10 years. Last year, like many others, we were strongly involved in the response to the Treaty Principles Bill, which our members strongly opposed. We have had similar sentiment about the Regulatory Standards Bill, which brings us here today. Today, though, I don't really want to talk about this bill as if it is a genuine, real solution to anything, actually. I've read through the discussion paper, the regulatory impact statement, and of course the bill itself, and it frankly just buzzes me out that we're sitting here in these virtual walls of a select committee room acting like this very calculated collection of words is a serious piece of legislation. I prefer to just be clear that this is simply another vehicle for David Seymour and the ACT Party to increase their power and control over how this country is run, despite their very small vote share and, frankly, very polarising ideas. The Regulatory Standards Bill is not a serious law. The Regulatory Standards Bill is not a serious law. A serious law would address a problem that needed to be fixed, whereas even Seymour's own Ministry of Regulation says that New Zealand rates fairly well on the international scale of quality lawmaking, and that this would not be the most effective way to make things better, which we've just heard. A serious law would not have been put forward to this House 3 times and been defeated at every point. On principle, a serious law would not decide what our constitutional values are on the basis of how we make and change laws, let alone shamelessly replace those values with an exact copy and paste job from a minority party's policies. A serious law would not be so ridiculous as to claim that the most important values to an entire nation in the Pacific is making sure individuals can protect their property and complain about what happens with their taxes. We can do that without passing this law. It would not reduce our entire human existences down to a monetary value, a desperate attempt to hold on to what's mine at the expense of what has always been ours. It will not transplant the ravings from the know-it-all student at the front of the political science class who can probably quote Adam Smith for hours but doesn't know how to dry the dishes. A serious law would not circumvent the democracy that its proponents wax lyrical about by suggesting that an unelected board would have undue, unearned, unnecessary power over how our laws are made. It would not make moves to build its own ministry, pronounce itself the minister, give itself the ability to point their own mates to a so-called independent board, and then decide what laws their mates will get to change. That sounds less like democracy and more like corruption. A serious law would not undermine our entire constitutional framework by omitting any obligations to te tiriti o Waitangi, and therefore breaching our founding agreement not once, but multiple times. Serious lawmakers would not question the role that te tiriti has in lawmaking, or what a Māori expert is in petty little handwritten notes in the margins. In fact, serious lawmakers would not try first to create legislation that rewrites a nearly 200-year-old treaty between nations upheld by international law and deliberately remove the part where the Indigenous people of that land have any political authority of their own. Serious lawmakers wouldn't try to incite division and turn the majority of a country against those Indigenous people by claiming some higher moral pretense of equality about the same people who die years earlier because they have been forced into unequal lives. When that whole debacle fails, and a nation rightly gives that certain Treaty Principles Bill a historical, record-breaking public humiliation, a serious lawmaker wouldn't then take the legislative side door to push through the exact same agenda, but with a different lick of paint. They wouldn't try to trick the public into changing some of the most important parts of our laws by stealth, siphoning public resources into ideological embarrassments, when food banks are forced to close beneath the weight of starving families and pensioners are too poor to turn their heaters on. Serious laws aren't rushed through. I don't get told by a serious lawmaker that I will be providing an oral submission on something constitutionally significant less than 48 hours before the Zoom link opens. They don't condense down the smallest amount of time for public input possible in a way that actually feels more insulting than if there were no select committee at all, because you know that unserious lawmakers will claim they do democracy like a tick box even if the outcome was already decided. Serious lawmakers can handle when their terrible laws are critiqued. They don't need to pretend it was bots instead of real living people who just don't agree with them because their ideas are bad. Serious lawmakers have a genuine respect for the public and welcome the knowledge of our country's revered minds when they share their genuine, informed concern about a nation's political trajectory. Instead of making defamatory attacks via little victim of the day Facebook rants signed off with no less than a parliamentary services logo. Serious lawmakers don't create an environment of emboldening hate and violence towards their critics. They don't make quiet comments about civil wars behind closed doors, start brush fires in the hearts of our most entitled, violent, and privileged men. They don't create the political context where ancestral marae get attacked, like earlier this week in Kuku, and literally leave behind business cards that say radical Māori are taking over our country. Serious laws don't result in Māori women needing to have security detail because they face such horrific, violent threats towards them and their families, simply for speaking up against a law that is deliberately trying to destroy their future. Serious lawmakers don't turn a blind eye to all of this in the name of politics. They don't quibble about clauses like this is a serious law. They don't turn racial division into a PR opportunity or remain silent when they know their colleagues have gone too far. They don't focus on what will get them votes at the next election while realizing they're burning down the very house they try and hold on to. At the very least, they must know that they are handing over the lighter to an unserious lawmaker who will be the first to set them on fire too. So by our assessment, this is an unserious law by unserious lawmakers. Let's just call it for what it is, a power grab made possible by a three-way handshake that has taken precedence over the very foundations of our democracy. This right here, right now, is a sign of how truly unserious we have become as a nation, and we can all see it. Lastly, I want to comment on how there seems to be this growing narrative led by members of this government that our country has reached this grand delusion of equality, that we no longer need Te Tiriti o Waitangi or the Waitangi Tribunal, and actually older, mostly property-owning Pākehā males are the new oppressed group of our society that fiercely need their rights defended. This kind of framing sets the scene for laws like this and multiple other pieces of anti-Te Tiriti legislation this government is pushing through. And I wanted to share a personal story on this. A few weeks ago, I went and stayed with an auntie and a new partner who is a staunch ACT voter. He spent a lot of his time sitting in his lazy boy in his beautiful modern colonial style home that he had designed himself, watching YouTube podcasts. He felt strongly that honouring Te Tiriti had gone too far and we needed to go back to some kind of good old days, of which I'm not quite sure what those are. During the same stay, we also went to my partner's cousin's unveiling, who had died from suicide last year. Rest in peace, Jacob. We also attended a hikoi that was held for people commemorating their loved ones who had committed suicide too. In a town of around 8,000 people in Huntly, you probably know it, I counted over 40 people standing in the early morning fog, holding photos of their loved ones who had passed. There would have been at least 100 people there on these tennis courts, most touched by suicide, in a town with, as I said, a very small population. All of the people there were Māori. All of the photos that I could see of the people who had passed looked Māori. They were men, and most of them were young, many of them leaving young families behind. Those tennis courts in the 8 a.m. fog in Huntley were a stark difference to the world that we were staying in not far down the road. And it made me wonder if those worlds ever meet. Do they ever really meet and see each other? Because there was no one that looked like that act vote at that Hikoi. And I honestly can't imagine that there would ever be a need for him to attend an event like this because he is so disconnected from the people who were there. And I don't know why all those people ended their lives, but I can bet it's not because Te Tiriti or Waitangi has gone too far or some kind of bollocks about special privileges. They look like they had lived hard lives. And I think the people who vote for laws like this and design laws like this have absolutely no idea of those lives. They have no idea what it is to walk in those lives. And I don't think that we should be talking about some kind of mythical equality that is simply not afforded to most Māori. It's just not. So let's just leave that in the past. And yet those people who are those voters, who are those people designing laws like this, are not the ones who are connected to what is happening on the ground. So in all of that, we're here to say Action Station Aotearoa oppose the bill. We believe it should be dropped immediately. We don't want to see anything like this again. We don't want to see these myths of equality. We want to move forward into a Te Tiriti-based future that genuinely looks after all of us and our planet too. Thank you again. I won't be taking any questions. Kia ora.
Oh, Kassie, Rawiri Waititi's got his hand up. No, she's gone. Okay, so she made that loud and clear. Members, we might just take, well, the Federation of Māori Authorities has withdrawn. We might just take a 3-minute